I'm Allan Brown, and today we're rebuilding a KTM 125 SX engine. So we got our cylinder back from Millennium. It had a really bad gouge in the exhaust port, and they've gone in and they re-welded it and completely replated the cylinder. They did a fantastic job on it, and let's start putting it back together. The O-rings for the power valve are all part of the kit for the top end gasket kit. So again, you've pretty much got everything you need in this one kit. Continuing with our Wiseco Garage Buddy kit, we've completed our bottom end. We've assembled our cylinder, including our power valve system. Leaves us our piston to install and assemble the top end. Before we install our piston and rings, we're going to check our piston ring end gap. Wiseco piston rings come pre-gapped, but it's always good to double check. We're using a plated cylinder, so the bore may not be exactly the same as stock. We're going to insert the piston ring into the cylinder, maybe about ½ an inch down. We're going to use the piston to square up the piston ring, so we have it parallel to the cylinder. I'm going to take my feeler gauge and just insert it in the groove. I'm using a 10 thousandths feeler gauge. Wiseco's guidelines is 4 thousandths per inch. This is roughly a 2-inch bore, so we're looking for a minimum of 8 thousandths end gap. This one is good and ready for installation. We're going to put one of the piston circlips in before I put it on the engine. Line up the clip in the groove with my fingers. I'm going to use the groove. I'm going to use the groove in the piston to just gently move it down. I don't want to stress the clip so it deforms too much. Making sure it's in the groove. I can use the wrist pin to make sure it's lined up. Once I have it in the groove, I like to rotate the gap so it's in the 12 o'clock position. We're ready to put our piston on. We've got our piston ring, the 2-stroke piston ring, and pretty much all piston rings have a top and a bottom. They're usually indicated with some kind of a marking, a letter indicating the top. The 2-stroke also will have a locating dowel in the piston for the gap. We'll line that up, and that locates the piston ring on the piston so it doesn't rotate. When you're ready to install your piston, always look at the top of the piston. A 2-stroke piston will have, and all pistons will have a forward and a backwards. This one's indicated with an arrow, so this will go towards the exhaust port. All right, we're ready to install our piston. Put our wrist pin in. A little lube, wrist pin. Okay, we're going to put our second wrist pin clip in. Before we do that, we're just going to cover up our bottom end. We don't want to drop the clip in there. It can be really hard to get out, and if you can't get it out, you might end up splitting your cases again. So just to protect it from falling in there, we have a rag. The clip's going to go in here. Again, I try and put one end in the groove. I gently start it with my fingers, not to distort or stress the clip too much, and then I can finish it with little pick. We really want to stress the importance of checking your wrist pin clips and making sure they're fully in the groove. I like to take an extra flashlight and just look in there very carefully and make sure that it's in the groove all the way around and square. This is the single easiest thing to make a mistake on that will result in a complete engine failure. We're ready to install our cylinder. We're working on a KTM. KTM engines come with optional thickness base gaskets. You can get a bit of a feel and compare the thicknesses to try and get it close. Obviously, if you have a set of calipers, it's a little easier to just measure the thickness and you can compare it with the new ones. If you don't have calipers, again, you can get a feel for it, compare it, and for safety purposes, you're better off going a little bit thicker than a little thinner. I'm going to prepare my engine cases by just cleaning off the little bit of center case gasket that's still sticking out. Again, I'm going to use a rag just to not let anything fall inside. Just use a razor blade, run it along there, and that side's good. I can do the same thing on this side. I want to have a very smooth surface right here on both sides so I don't have an air leak. We've selected a base gasket. There's a dowel pin here to line it up. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on my piston ring and in the piston ring groove, just for a little lubrication. I'm going to double check my ring groove with the piston dowel pin, locating pin, make sure I'm in the right spot. So I'm ready to install my cylinder. I've already installed my power valve. I've checked everything. I'm going to give it one quick double check to make sure my cylinder is clean. Just wipe it down gently. Make sure there's no dirt. I'm going to use a little bit of oil. Just spread it around gently. Again, looking at my piston ring, making sure it's located correctly. Take my cylinder, slide it over. I'm holding the piston ring, compressing the piston ring with my fingers, putting the cylinder on. I'm being very careful not to rotate the cylinder. You don't want to do this or this with the cylinder. I'm going straight up and down with the cylinder at all times. Not turning it, sliding it down. And it's on. Don't forget, with your Garage Buddy kit, you have a new crankshaft. You'll need to transfer the keyway for the flywheel from the old crankshaft to the new crankshaft. You also need to do this before you put the stator back on the engine. I put it in the groove. I like to just squeeze it down into place. I don't like hitting it with a hammer. installed our cylinder, torqued down our 4-cylinder stud bolts. Just going to turn the engine over, make sure everything is free. My engine turns over nice and smooth. We're ready to put our cylinder head on. Now our dowel pins, our locating pins were removed because this cylinder was replated. We've got cylinder head O-rings. There's a total of 3 on the KTM. KTM has a removable cylinder head dome, so don't forget this O-ring. We've installed our cylinder head bolts, and then of course we'll always torque them to the manufacturer specification. We've got our cylinder head on, torqued down. You have to reconnect your power valve system. We can double check one more time just to make sure that our piston still turns over correctly. Making sure we didn't make a mistake in our squish and our piston could possibly be hitting the cylinder head. Our engine is still turning over really well. And spark plug. One thing you can always double check while you're doing your Garage Buddy rebuild, you can check your reed pedals. Make sure they're not cracked or frayed. These ones are very good. Also clean your gasket surfaces. Make sure there's no air leaks. Just cutting away the excess gasket. Install the new gaskets provided with the Garage Buddy kit. Finished rebuilding this KTM 125 with our Wiseco Garage Buddy kit. It included the crankshaft, the main bearings, the piston, all the gaskets and seals that we needed. Even came with a handy hour meter so we can keep track of our new engine rebuild and when it's time to freshen it up once again. Our next step is to put this engine in the bike, break it in, get it out of the track and ride it and see how it runs. Be sure to follow Wiseco for more and to check this bike out once it's running.